The low, electronic chime of the bank notification was the sound that shattered Cassandra's reality. Her son, Alistair, had only been living back in the house for 3 weeks, ostensibly to help manage things after Cassandra's recent minor surgery. She had offered him the guest suite, the keys to the Mercedes, and most disastrously, access to her new smartphone, setting up all her accounts for him on the pretext of making her life easier. She was sitting in the sunroom, attempting to read a novel she'd been putting off for years, when the notification appeared on the screen, a small, damning snippet of text. Transfer of $1,200 from C. Sterling Savings to A. Sterling Checking. Memo: Home maintenance. Cassandra stared. Home maintenance. There was no maintenance. Alistair hadn't even fixed the squeaky hinge on the back gate, a task he'd promised to tackle 3 days ago. But it wasn't the lie that turned her stomach. It was the swift, automated efficiency of the transaction. Her gaze drifted to the corner of the screen, where a new, brightly colored icon sat. A generic, shield-shaped logo with the words, Secure Guard Finance Manager, beneath it. Alistair had insisted on installing it, claiming it was a vital security measure to monitor for suspicious activity. She tapped the icon. The app didn't ask for a password. It opened instantly to a stark, detailed dashboard. Her eyes scanned the recent activity, a cold wave of realization washing over her. $1,200. $850 last week, labeled Urgent Utility Overdue. $2,500 the week before, marked Roof Repair Deposit. The memo field for every single transaction was a carefully crafted lie. But the worst part, the absolute core of the betrayal, wasn't the transfers themselves. It was the tracking capability. In the app settings, under alerts and triggers, there was a rule Alistair had set up, a chilling piece of code. Notify Sterling via SMS for any transfer over $500, or any login activity to C. Sterling Bank. He hadn't installed the app to protect her. He had installed it to monitor her. To track her spending, her awareness, and her ability to fight back. The very act of her transferring money, perhaps to a friend or to a charity, would instantly alert him. The intent wasn't just theft. It was control. He was not a caregiver. He was a gatekeeper, watching the vault. Alistair walked in then, a pitcher of iced tea in his hand, his demeanor radiating an exhausting, practiced solicitude. "Mom, dear, you look a little pale. Are you following the doctor's orders and keeping your feet up?" Cassandra slowly lowered the phone, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. Her voice, when it finally came out, was dangerously quiet. "Alistair, tell me about the $1,200 transfer for home maintenance." Alistair's smile didn't waver. It merely tightened, becoming a brittle, defensive mask. "Oh, that. Yes, I was just about to tell you. I had to pay the plumber. You know, the persistent drip in the main bathroom? It was getting worse, Mom. We can't have mold. I used my own judgment because the contractor needed a deposit right away. Just being proactive, keeping your house safe for you." He placed the pitcher down, making the ice rattle. "Don't you worry your head over it, though. I'll handle all the tedious financial details." The words "your house and your head" were the final keystrokes on her indictment. The pain of the physical theft was nothing compared to the monumental insult of the psychological abuse. "No," Cassandra said, the single syllable sharp and sudden, like a cracked pane of glass. "You won't." She didn't explode. She didn't cry. Instead, she leaned back, closing her eyes, and began the cold, precise mental accounting of her indignation. This wasn't a sudden lapse. It was a decades-long erosion. She opened her eyes, fixing her son with a gaze that had suddenly aged 40 years. Not with frailty, but with hard-earned, brutal clarity. She remembered the year 2008, Alistair, fresh out of a costly, useless film school, declaring he needed a startup fund for a revolutionary new app, $15,000 she had loaned him. A gift she knew would never be repaid, yet she had pretended to believe his grand promises. Then came the countless bridge loans for rent and utilities over the next 10 years, always with the promise of the big break, just around the corner. She estimated a conservative $12,000 in those small, chipping payments that bled her savings dry. And just last year, the $4,500 payment to clear his credit card debt, which he had maxed out on a luxury vacation with his wife, Serafina. Serafina. The daughter-in-law who hadn't cooked a meal for Cassandra since the caregiving started, yet constantly posted photos of expensive restaurant dinners on social media. The current transfers, $4,550 in the last 3 weeks alone, were just the tip of the iceberg, bringing the total financial hemorrhage over the years to a crushing, insulting figure, $31,550. And that didn't even account for the value of the free rent, food, and utilities he was consuming now. I gave you a future, Cassandra thought, the quantification solidifying her resolve. And you repaid me by tracking my bank account like I'm a child. She realized she needed to move fast and be utterly opaque. She needed validation. She placed the phone on the table and stood up. I'm just going out for a coffee, dear. The sunroom is getting a bit stuffy. I need a change of scenery. Oh no, Mom, you shouldn't drive yet. Alistair rushed toward her, his face a mask of patronizing concern. Let me take you. Or better yet, I'll call Serafina. She can grab you a latte. You need to rest. I said I need a change of scenery, Cassandra repeated, her tone allowing zero room for discussion. She walked past him to the foyer and pulled the keys to the older, more discreet sedan from the hook, the car Alistair refused to drive. She drove straight to the home of her oldest friend, Beatrice. Beatrice had been Cassandra's confidant since college, a woman of sharp wit and an even sharper tongue. Beatrice opened the door, her face momentarily softening with concern, then hardening as she saw the controlled fury in Cassandra's eyes. Cassandra, what is it? You look like you've just seen the bill for all of your life choices. Cassandra sat down and laid out the facts, starting with the app. Beatrice listened, her expression moving from shock to a slow, burning rage. But when Cassandra finished, Beatrice's reaction took a sharp, unexpected turn. Cassandra, I need to tell you something, and I haven't known how to say it, Beatrice began, her voice low. I was at the country club bridge night last week. Serafina was there, with her sister. They were talking about you. A chilling certainty settled over Cassandra. What did they say? They were telling everyone that your post-op confusion was getting worse. Serafina mentioned how Alistair had to take over everything because you were making erratic transfers. She specifically cited one you made to that ridiculous cat rescue, and that you'd been yelling at him for misplacing your checkbook. She even said Alistair was worried you were approaching, well, cognitive decline, and that he was exploring legal options to protect your assets from yourself. The air left Cassandra's lungs. It wasn't just theft. It was a calculated, public assassination of her reputation and her competence. The rumors were already circulating. The betrayal was complete, the foundation laid for a legal challenge to strip her of her autonomy. They're painting me as a senile, extravagant fool, Cassandra whispered, the words tasting like ash. So that when the money disappears, everyone will believe I either wasted it or forgot. Beatrice took her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Cassandra, you have to fight this. And you have to do it without showing them an inch of weakness. Cassandra nodded, the crisis of confidence receding, replaced by a crystalline clarity. She didn't need to be frail. She needed to be a predator. When she got home, she walked straight into the kitchen, where Alistair was lounging, scrolling on his phone. Alistair, she said, louder this time. He looked up, a placid, expectant look on his face. Yes, Mom. Did you enjoy your outing? Should I call the doctor to check your vitals? No need. I just did a few of my own transfers while I was out. And I noticed something, she said, holding his gaze. The Secure Guard app on my phone is excellent. Truly. Alistair's face went completely blank for a split second before the practiced smile reappeared. I told you, Mom, best security feature. Oh, it's not the security I admire, Cassandra interrupted, her voice a silk thread wrapped around a razor blade. It's the alerts. I assume you get one for every login. Alastair hesitated. Well, yes, I set that up in case of phishing. Good, she said, her voice dropping to a decisive finality. Because I've just moved the entire balance of the Sterling Family Trust, the one your sister, Genevieve, and you are joint trustees of, into a new, separate, and very private offshore account. An account you do not have a name, number, or alert for. Alastair dropped his phone. It clattered against the marble floor. You did what? Mom. That's not allowed. That's not what the trust is for. It's allowed because I'm the primary settler and the sole signatory, dear. The Sterling Family Trust was my money, not your personal ATM. And as of 40 minutes ago, it's not available to either of you. He scrambled to pick up his phone, his fingers shaking as he tried to open his bank app, the mask completely gone, replaced by naked, desperate panic. But I needed that. Serafina and I just signed the papers for the new condo, Mom. The deposit is due tomorrow. Where is it? Cassandra, I need access. This is an emergency. You can't do this to me. Cassandra looked at him, not with anger, but with the cold scientific detachment of someone observing a specimen under glass. She delivered her final, devastating one-liner. You may track my transfers, Alastair, but you can no longer cash them. He stared, his face turning an unhealthy, mottled red. Then, a chilling transformation. The panic curdled into a furious, arrogant sense of entitlement. You are making a huge mistake, Mom. A senile, disastrous mistake, Alastair sneered, his eyes flashing with genuine malice. I have proof of your mental state. I have the emails you sent, the money you transferred to that insane charity, the notes from Serafina. I tried to do this the easy way, as your loving son, but you clearly need protection from yourself. I'm calling the lawyer first thing in the morning. We will have you declared incompetent, and I will be back in control of every single penny by the end of the week. The morning after the trust fund transfer was chaos. Cassandra woke to the incessant aggressive ringing of the doorbell, not the gentle civilized chime, but the frantic sustained buzz of someone trying to force entry with sheer noise. She pulled on a silk robe and descended the main staircase, the solid marble steps grounding her. At the foyer door stood Alastair, his face contorted with sleepless fury, and beside him, a portly man in a pinstripe suit carrying a leather briefcase, radiating the distinct, oily confidence of a mercenary lawyer. Cassandra didn't need to hear the name. She recognized the species. She opened the door just enough to see them, keeping the security chain firmly fastened. Mom, this is Mr. Silas Finch, my attorney, Alastair announced, his voice tight with false authority. He needs to speak with you about the immediate, unauthorized, and frankly illegal transfer of the Sterling Trust funds. We need access to the documents proving your capacity to execute such a maneuver. Mr. Finch leaned closer to the gap, his eyes narrow and assessing. Mrs. Sterling, I strongly advise you to cooperate. Under the provisions of the trust, any drastic movement of capital without documented cause could be seen as an act of financial instability, which, coupled with recent reports of your erratic behavior. He didn't finish the sentence, but the implied threat hung in the air. Incompetence. They weren't asking, they were establishing the basis for a conservatorship, intending to seize control of everything. Cassandra did not flinch. She looked directly at Mr. Finch, ignoring Alastair entirely. Mr. Finch, I am the sole signatory and primary settler of that trust. It is revocable at my discretion, which I have exercised. Furthermore, I have already initiated the necessary paperwork to dissolve the co-trusteeship, effective immediately. She paused, letting the implications sink in. As for my erratic behavior, I have documentation that shows a pattern of financial abuse perpetrated by my son Alastair, including the installation of a tracking app on my personal phone to monitor my bank transfers. The lawyer's composure cracked. His eyes flickered to Alastair, who was visibly paling. This is ridiculous, Alastair shouted, attempting to barge against the door. She's delusional, Mr. Finch. She's imagining things. She needs a professional intervention, not a lawyer. Cassandra looked at her son, the last shred of maternal tolerance disintegrating into granite. Alistair, this is my property. You are a trespasser. You have precisely 60 seconds to leave my premises, or I will call the police and file a restraining order. She waited, silent and unmoving. Alistair sputtered, his confidence collapsing into desperate rage. Finch, realizing this was not the easy, frail victim he had anticipated, placed a calming hand on Alistair's arm. "We will be in touch, Mrs. Sterling," Finch muttered, pulling his client away. "This is far from over. We are prepared to litigate the issue of your capacity." Cassandra closed the door with a quiet, decisive click. She did not feel fear. She felt a cold, determined resolve. She was at war, and she had just won the first, small skirmish. Her next move was critical. She couldn't fight a shark like Finch with only her own resolve. She needed a legal shark, but one with an ethical compass. She knew the type of lawyer she needed wouldn't advertise on billboards. She drove across town to the old quiet financial district, stopping outside the discreet, elegant offices of Sterling and Hawthorne. The name, ironically, was close to her own, but the reputation of the senior partner, Genevieve Hawthorne, was legendary, a fierce advocate for victims of elder financial abuse. The consultation was not cheap, but Cassandra paid the retainer without hesitation. Genevieve Hawthorne was a woman who didn't waste words. She reviewed Cassandra's meticulous documentation, the quantified accounting of the $31,550 in loans, the evidence of the SecureGuard app, and Alistair's threatening messages. "Mrs. Sterling," Genevieve said, leaning back, her expression grave. "You've done the right thing. This isn't just common theft. This is a classic case of elder financial abuse, compounded by the attempt to establish a conservatorship based on fabricated incompetence. Their goal is to drain your assets legally." Genevieve's validation was the legal sanction Cassandra desperately needed. "We need to document everything," Genevieve continued, her tone shifting into strategic mode. "Every harassing call, every attempt at contact. Their aggressive approach suggests they are desperate, likely overextended on that condo deposit. We will counter their conservatorship petition with a civil suit for fraud and financial abuse, backed by the police report you will file tomorrow." "Will I have to see him often?" Cassandra asked, her voice faltering slightly. "Only in court when we destroy his case," Genevieve replied, a slight predatory smile touching her lips. "For now, your mission is physical and digital autonomy." Cassandra spent the rest of the day establishing new control. First, she visited her long-term bank and, with Genevieve's explicit instructions, initiated a total lockdown of all accounts. She changed every single password, implemented two-factor authentication that required her thumbprint, and established a series of code words and security questions that only she would know. She closed the accounts Alistair knew about and opened new ones at a different, smaller, and more discreet institution. Next, she returned home and called a contractor. By the end of the afternoon, the old, easy-to-pick front door locks were replaced with high-security, tamper-proof electronic deadbolts. She also had 4 discrete, high-definition cameras installed. 1 covering the driveway, 1 the back gate, and 2 covering the interior common areas. The footage, she made sure, was uploaded instantly to a secure, encrypted cloud server. The physical barriers were up. That evening, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was not Alistair. It was Mrs. Elena Petrova, her neighbor, a feisty, retired history teacher and founding member of Cassandra's Bridge Club. Elena was a woman who cherished order, documentation, and justice, a perfect social ally. "Cassandra, I saw those 2 vultures at your door this morning," Elena stated, walking straight into the kitchen, carrying a fresh-baked apple crumble. "That lawyer, Silas Finch. He has the reputation of a snake." And Alistair looked like a man about to lose his lottery ticket. Cassandra confessed everything, from the tracking app to the conservatorship threat. Elena set the crumble down with a decisive thud. "Oh, that vile man. You should have told me sooner, dear. He and that airhead wife of his have been whispering about your poor memory, at the tennis club for months. They've been setting the stage for this for a long time. They want the house and the liquidity. Elena offered the emotional validation Cassandra hadn't known she craved. You are not crazy, Cassandra. You are being abused. And what they are doing is criminal. You fight them. And if they show their faces here again, you call me first. I will gather the bridge club. We are your army, and we know how to document a scene. The validation from Genevieve and Elena fueled a profound, necessary change. Cassandra had spent 20 years neglecting herself, pouring her energy and capital into raising 2 children and supporting Alistair's endless, failing ventures. Now, she was investing in the only person who mattered, herself. She booked an appointment at the most expensive salon in town, demanding a dramatic change. She returned home with her hair cut into a sharp, modern bob and dyed a rich, vibrant silver, replacing the faded, tired auburn. She bought 3 new, beautifully tailored suits, clothes that spoke of competence and control, not of a quiet, retiring widow. The new clothes weren't frivolous. They were armor. The self-investment paid off immediately in confidence, but it also enraged the enemy. Alistair and Serafina began a relentless campaign of harassment, 30 or 40 texts and calls a day, alternating between desperate pleas for just enough for the condo deposit and venomous threats about reporting your excessive spending to the court. The moment Serafina texted, "Enjoy your fancy hair while you still can, Mom. You won't need it when you're confined," Cassandra took the evidence straight to the police and, on Genevieve's advice, filed for a temporary restraining order. The legal process began to turn the tables. The restraining order was served late that evening. The immediate silence on her phone was a profound, restorative peace. But the war was escalating. 2 days later, a formal, official-looking letter arrived via registered mail. It was a notice from the County Adult Protective Services, APS, informing Cassandra that they had received an anonymous complaint detailing concerns about the welfare and self-neglect of Mrs. Cassandra Sterling, specifically citing her inability to manage her finances and her increasing isolation. The villain had raised the stakes by involving a governmental authority. Alistair and Serafina were now weaponizing the state bureaucracy against her, using the system designed to protect the vulnerable to destroy her autonomy. The summons from Adult Protective Services, APS, was a strategic attack, designed to induce panic and force Cassandra into immediate, defensive errors. It was the institutional attack. However, thanks to Genevieve Hawthorne, Cassandra was prepared. The APS investigator, Ms. Ramirez, arrived promptly on the appointed day, a woman with the weary professionalism of someone who had seen too much genuine misery. Ms. Ramirez sat across from Cassandra in the newly renovated, brightly lit sunroom, her clipboard held tight. "Mrs. Sterling, we received an anonymous report detailing financial mismanagement, specifically concerning large, erratic transfers, and allegations of self-neglect due to cognitive issues," Ms. Ramirez stated, her tone neutral. "I understand your son, Alistair Sterling, was the source of the initial concern." "My son is attempting to seize my assets through a fabricated claim of incompetence, Ms. Ramirez," Cassandra replied, her voice steady and clear. Her new silver hair, her tailored suit, and the pristine, organized environment of the room spoke volumes against the accusation of self-neglect. "I am aware of his pending petition for conservatorship," Ms. Ramirez acknowledged. "Then you should also be aware of the countersuit filed by my attorney, Genevieve Hawthorne, for elder financial abuse and fraud." Cassandra didn't just speak, she produced evidence. She placed a neat binder on the table. This binder contains every transfer Alistair claims was erratic, $31,550, precisely, all directly transferred to him over the last 16 years. Here are the notes from my attorney detailing the tracing of the Secure Guard tracking application he installed on my phone. And here, she slid over the documentation for her new security system, are the invoices and police report confirming the filing of a temporary restraining order against him due to continuous harassment and threat. Ms. Ramirez spent 10 silent minutes reviewing the documentation. The evidence was overwhelming, and it didn't point to a fragile, confused elder. It pointed to a sharp, organized woman being preyed upon. Finally, Ms. Ramirez looked up, her professional neutrality replaced by a flicker of professional indignation. Mrs. Sterling, based on this thorough documentation and the clear evidence of coercion and financial tracking, I see no basis for concern regarding your capacity or welfare. In fact, the abuse seems to have been directed at you, not by you. She closed her clipboard. I will be closing this case immediately and forwarding my full report to the court. I highly recommend that your attorney uses this report to suggest to the judge that the conservatorship petition is, in fact, an attempt to leverage the system to continue the abuse. The institutional attack had been completely reversed. Cassandra didn't just survive the scrutiny. She turned the system's focus onto Alastair's malicious intent. The closure of the APS case sent Alastair and Serafina into a frenzy of desperation. Their response was swift and dirty: the falsification of evidence. Genevieve called Cassandra 2 days later, her voice tense. They filed a crucial, last-minute affidavit with the court. It's a statement from Dr. Harold Vance, a retired GP, attesting that he conducted a series of informal mental wellness checks on you over the last month, and that you display clear signs of impaired judgment and episodic confusion. Cassandra felt a sickening drop in her stomach. Dr. Vance? But he's my sister's friend. He hasn't been my doctor in 20 years, and I haven't seen him since my surgery. Exactly, Genevieve confirmed. They clearly misled him, or paid him off. The statement is highly detailed and very damaging because it comes from a medical professional, even a retired one. We must get a retraction immediately. If he testifies, this whole case becomes a 50-50 risk. Cassandra knew what she had to do. She drove to the secluded, exclusive retirement community where Dr. Vance lived. She found him sitting on his porch, reading the paper. "Harold," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I need to talk to you about the document you signed for Alastair." Dr. Vance looked up, his face registering a mixture of shame and embarrassment. "Cassandra, I thought Alastair was helping you. He came to me with Serafina. He said you were forgetting to pay bills, making strange investments, and that your mental state had deteriorated rapidly after the surgery. He showed me notes, texts from you, that were quite concerning, disjointed, angry. He just asked me to sign a statement confirming his worry, as an old friend. He said it was only for his private legal counsel." "The texts and notes were fabricated, Harold," Cassandra said, pulling out a printout of the APS closure report. "Alastair installed an app to track my money, coerced over $30,000 from me, and is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can seize my home. This affidavit will be used in court next week to prove I am mentally ill." Dr. Vance read the APS report and the supporting evidence Cassandra had brought. The police report, the documentation of financial abuse. His face paled. The retired physician realized he hadn't helped a struggling son. He had become an unwitting accomplice in a fraud. "My God, Cassandra, I am so sorry," he whispered, shaking his head. "I was tricked. I would never intentionally put your autonomy at risk. Tell me what I need to do." "You need to write a full retraction notarized, stating that the information provided to you by Alastair was false and misleading, and that you have no recent professional knowledge of my mental state," Cassandra instructed, her strategic mind working. Dr. Vance didn't hesitate. By the end of the day, Genevieve had the notarized retraction, a key piece of Alastair's fabricated case crumbling under the weight of Cassandra's determined investigation. The court, now aware of the escalating legal and personal skirmishes, mandated a neutral psychiatric/cognitive assessment for Cassandra. This was the final hurdle. The independent assessment was conducted by Dr. Helena Cho, a renowned forensic psychiatrist. The assessment was grueling. Dr. Cho subjected Cassandra to hours of tests, memory recall, logic puzzles, financial reasoning scenarios, and detailed interviews about her life and decisions. Cassandra answered every question with the same precision and clarity she had used to dismantle the APS and Dr. Vance's statements. She didn't hide the facts of the abuse. She narrated them as a logical series of actions taken by a competent person under duress. A week later, Genevieve called, sounding triumphant. "The report is in," Cassandra. Dr. Cho's conclusion is that your cognitive functioning is above average for your demographic. Furthermore, she noted that your actions in securing your assets and seeking legal counsel following the discovery of the financial tracking app demonstrate high executive function, prudent decision-making, and an exceptional capacity for self-protection. This report is the nail in their coffin, demonstrating that they are not protecting you, they are persecuting you. With the trial date looming, Cassandra met with her allies, Beatrice and Elena, at Elena's house. It was time for the army gathers. "We are ready to testify, Cassandra," Elena declared, pouring a celebratory glass of sparkling cider. "Beatrice and I have documented every single piece of slander Serafina and Alistair have spread, the erratic behavior, the confusion, the attempts to paint you as a spent force. We'll tell the judge the truth, that this is greed, not guardianship," Beatrice added firmly. Their solidarity was a shield, but their presence also forced the final, painful confrontation with her grief. "I appreciate this more than you know," Cassandra said, her eyes suddenly burning with unshed tears. "I look at all this evidence, the documented abuse, the lies, the sheer malice, and I realize something. I'm not fighting for my money anymore. I'm fighting for the dignity that they tried to steal." She paused, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "But the hardest part is accepting that the person I am going to destroy next week is my own son. The person I raised, the person I poured my sacrifices into. That Alistair is dead. He died when he installed that app to track my bank account. And I cannot, and will not, bring the memory of that love into the courtroom with me. I have to accept that the fight is irreversible and the family love is dead." She wept for a few moments, the grief of final purging of the maternal weakness that had allowed the abuse to flourish. Then she stood up, wiping her eyes with fierce resolution. She was no longer a victim, she was a witness against a crime, and her emotional detachment was her ultimate weapon. The next morning, the formal envelope arrived. It was the final summons for the conservatorship trial, the date and time for the courtroom showdown that would determine her future. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the APS report, the doctor's retraction, the psychiatric validation, Cassandra knew the power of legal manipulation. Her freedom, her dignity, and her life were still hanging in the balance, a prize Alistair and Serafina were still determined to seize. The courtroom, paneled in dark oak and smelling faintly of old paper and nervous sweat, was the arena for the final judgment. Cassandra sat beside Genevieve Hawthorne, the tailored suit feeling less like armor now and more like a second unyielding skin. Across the room sat Alistair and Serafina, their faces a mixture of strained confidence and palpable desperation. Silas Finch, their lawyer, was smugly shuffling papers, clearly believing his narrative of a loving son protecting his confused mother would prevail over the mere documentation of money trails. The conservatorship trial began. Finch opened by painting Cassandra as a figure of tragic recent decline, relying heavily on the fabricated, though now retracted, affidavit from Dr. Vance and a stream of circumstantial evidence. The large recent purchases of clothes and the salon visit, spun as signs of reckless extravagance. But Genevieve was ruthless. She countered with the precision of a master architect dismantling a shoddy structure. She presented the APS closure report, which not only dismissed the claims of incompetence but actively suggested fraud. She submitted the full, scathing report from Dr. Cho, which attested to Cassandra's above-average mental competence and exceptional executive function. The climax of the trial came when Cassandra took the stand. Finch attempted to dominate her testimony, trying to provoke confusion. "Mrs. Sterling, is it not true that you had a lapse in judgment and transferred nearly $4,000 to a charity Alistair disapproved of?" "I transferred $4,550 to the Wings of Hope Bird Sanctuary over the course of a year," Cassandra stated, her voice calm and projecting. "I did so because I was under the impression that the balance in my trust was secure, and I believed I was entitled to use my own money for my passions." "And when did you discover the trust was not secure, Mrs. Sterling?" Finch sneered, leaning into the vulnerability of her confusion. Cassandra looked directly at the judge, her eyes radiating clear, cold indignation. I discovered it when I found the Secure Guard Finance Manager app on my phone. The one my son, Alistair, insisted on installing, claiming it was for my protection. I discovered it was a surveillance tool, set to alert him via text message anytime I attempted to move over $500, effectively tracking and controlling my every transaction. She turned slightly, facing the courtroom. And this was where her testimony turned the incompetency proceedings into a moral judgment against the villain's greed. Your Honor, Cassandra continued, her voice rising slightly with conviction, this is not a trial about my competence. The documentation proves my competence. This is a trial about greed and the catastrophic failure of filial duty. I poured my resources, over $31,000, into my son's failed ventures over 2 decades, only to have him move back into my home, not as a caregiver, but as a predator setting a trap. He didn't want to protect me from myself. He wanted to protect his access to my bank accounts. When I cut off that access, he did not call a doctor. He called a lawyer to demand the court strip me of my rights so he could take everything. She concluded, her gaze sweeping over Alistair and Serafina, who now looked like 2 children caught vandalizing a monument. I ask you, Your Honor, who is truly incompetent? The mother who recognizes a betrayal and takes decisive, organized legal action to protect her estate and her dignity? Or the son who believes his entitlement is so great that he can commit fraud, abuse, and libel, and then ask the court to reward him with his mother's complete financial control? The courtroom was silent. The judge, a severe woman known for her zero-tolerance policy on financial exploitation, spoke slowly, deliberate. Mr. Finch, I have reviewed the comprehensive medical and cognitive assessments, the APS report, the retracted affidavit, and the physical evidence of financial tracking. The petitioner, Alistair Sterling, has failed to present any credible evidence of the respondent's mental decline. Instead, the court is left with the compelling, documented evidence of elder financial abuse. She looked straight at Alistair. The purpose of this court is to protect the vulnerable, not to facilitate theft. The petition for conservatorship over Mrs. Cassandra Sterling is not only denied, it is rejected with extreme prejudice. Alistair started to rise, looking incredulous, but the judge slammed her gavel down. Furthermore, due to the malicious nature of the petition, the clear attempts to fabricate evidence, and the documentation of financial abuse, the court is imposing full legal sanctions on the petitioners. Mr. Alistair Sterling and Ms. Serafina Sterling are hereby required to pay all of Mrs. Sterling's legal costs. And effective immediately, the temporary restraining order is made permanent, ensuring a wide, permanent distance between them and their victim. The victory wasn't just a legal win. It was a vindication of Cassandra's self-trust and her intelligence. The villain's collapse was total, swift, and observed by Cassandra with icy detachment. Alistair and Serafina erupted. Alistair lunged forward, shouting, "This is not fair. That money was supposed to be mine. I earned it. You are an old hag. You deserve to lose everything." The bailiffs intervened immediately, pulling the screaming couple back. Serafina, her face stained with ruined makeup, wailed about the lost condo deposit and their ruined lives. Cassandra watched the meltdown, the final ignoble display of their entitlement and utter lack of remorse, with a serene expression. She felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just the closure of a terrible chapter. They were not victims. They were simply facing the inevitable consequence of their choices. Their financial future was now precarious, their reputations destroyed by the public record of the trial, and their relationship with the source of their wealth severed forever. The cycle of abuse was closed, sealed by the judge's gavel. The epilogue was dedicated to peace and the moral of the story. 6 months later, Cassandra was on a cruise ship sailing through the Mediterranean. She wasn't traveling alone. She was with Elena and Beatrice. They were laughing on the deck, playing bridge, and sipping cocktails. Cassandra had sold the large house, the house that felt less like a home and more like a fortress and a bank for a predatory child, and moved into a bright modern apartment overlooking the ocean. The remaining capital, once a tool of control for others, was now purely a tool for her own freedom. She had taken up pottery, her hands now kneading clay with a meditative focus she hadn't experienced in decades. She was not defined by motherhood or widowhood. She was defined by her survival and her strength. She had finally chosen herself. Looking out over the endless blue water, Cassandra reflected on the hard-won lesson. The abuse had taught her the true value of boundaries, the necessity of documentation, and the preciousness of genuine allies. Her final, profound moral crystallized in the quiet moment. True freedom is not found in the size of your savings account, but in choosing who deserves your time and your money. Alistair thought my money was his by right, and that he could use my age as a weapon to take it. But wisdom, unlike youth, doesn't diminish with time. It sharpens. I was not a frail old woman in that courtroom. I was the architect of my own defense. I bought my peace back, and that investment was priceless. Did you like this story? The tale of Alistair is a brutal reminder that sometimes, the greatest betrayals come from those closest to you. But it also proves that you are never too old to fight for your dignity and your control. What would you have done when you found that tracking app on your phone? Would you have confronted him immediately, or gone silent like I did? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories of resilience are what keep this channel running. And don't forget to subscribe to the Amália Diaries for more long-form stories of injustice, wisdom, and the ultimate, satisfying revenge.